Do you come from a history of body issues then? Did your mother have body issues? Were the sins of the mother visited upon the daughter in some way?
You know, I get asked that question all the time. And
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Bad journalism, Nikki. No, I'm joking. It's a natural assumption to make, isn't it? And I think all too often mothers, you know, all the blame is placed at the door of mothers. It just so happens that my mum is very beautiful and very glamorous and very slender, but that's just what she's like. And she always said to me that, you know, she thought that she should be beautiful because that was all she knew how to do. That's not true. She's actually very clever and funny as well. But she said to me, you know, this is all I know how to do. You're brilliant. You go out and do what you want to do. So when I was younger, I very much defined myself as the clever one, and that was my identity, and I was happy with that. It was only after I left school and I went to university and I started to get noticed for my looks that actually it became an issue, and I started to define myself as having to be good looking. I saw that as an intrinsic part of being a woman, and that's when, yes, I did start to develop issues with food and with my body.
And what were your issues? Were they control issues?
My issues were, well, I mean, I'm nearly 6 foot tall and very broad, and I always felt very sort of galumphing and big and manly compared to my very short, petite friends. And I felt this desire to shrink and to be inconspicuous. And it took me a long while to realise that, you know, I walk down the street and people look, and that's okay, you know, and actually that's a positive thing. But there were times when I just felt so self-conscious, and I wanted to be thin at all costs. And of course there were, you know, there were emotional reasons behind it, as there are with all eating disorders. But I played some very dangerous risks with my own health, and I know I'm not alone in doing that.
Well, I find it interesting because a therapist friend of mine says that the number of bulimics, especially, not so much anorexics, but bulimics, and she even uses the term bulimorexic, because the bulimics can swing and, you know, and be slightly more anorexic at times. The number of them who've been sexually abused or who've lost sexual boundaries in childhood is huge, and there's a big correlation. Now, I'm not asking you a personal question like that, but some people just look at somebody who's bulimic or anorexic or who has issues with food and their body image as being vain. And yet it can come from such a dark and intense place, can't it?
You raise a really important point there. There's more than one way to have an to be anorexic or to have an eating disorder or to be bulimic.
Yeah.
Everybody's individual experience is different. Everyone defines the parameters of their own eating disorder if they have one. For some people, they've been bullied or they've been abused. For other people, they get a virus and they lose a bit of weight and they like it. They like the attention, and that leads on to something a lot more sinister. There's not always, I mean, I speak to parents through Body Gossip who are just beating themselves up thinking, my child must have gone through something terrible in their early childhood to now be suffering from an eating disorder. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and you have to judge each individual case, you know, as it comes.
Do you find that people are more willing now to talk about issues like this? Is that partly what perhaps Body Gossip has managed to move forward? Because I certainly remember when I was at school, so I'm 45. Say when I was 14, I would say, when we were all starting to develop as women, a lot of the girls around me started to develop unhealthy patterns of eating or exercising, and they had control issues. But nobody would talk about it. It was an area of shame. And I think even those women today, and I still see some of those women, and they still have issues. But there was something that needed to be hidden away. It was a very furtive way of living. But I now see people talking about this a lot more. But so do you think there's been a change? And if so, why? And how?
Well, awareness raising in this arena is a very double-edged sword, I think. There's a lot of myths that are being perpetuated. You know, this idea that you can only have an eating disorder if you're a teenage girl, and you can only be anorexic if you're 5 stone. And that's because the most extreme cases are shown in the public eye. And a lot of people, we find when we get stories sent to us about eating disorders at Body Gossip, they almost don't feel entitled to have an eating disorder, because they're like, well, you know, I'm 8 stone and I'm 23. story. So I can't have an eating disorder, you know. So the idea with Body Gossip, and I should stress, we're not just an eating disorders campaign.
No.
You know, we have stories from cancer survivors, people who are, you know, amputees, people who are really into sport, people who don't like their legs, you know, anything. Like I say, everyone has a body. But the idea with Body Gossip is that we wanted it to be real, we wanted it to be authentic, and we always say to people, if you're going to send us a story, you don't have to be an amazing writer, you just have to sound like you.